Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Whatever time of the day it is that you're listening to this program, welcome to Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff. And no, we're not quite yet on YouTube. Not quite, but ever so closely getting there. I said that I thought my next podcast would be on YouTube. So I encourage everybody to make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff. The same exact wording, phrasing, spelling, most importantly, that you see on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this audio version. So Philadelphia Eagles Talk W/Geoff, Geoff. That's the YouTube channel. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, that you subscribe because we're in the final testing phases. Um, did a couple mock videos myself just to kind of test it out. Now, the only other thing is I'm just going to bring on a guest or two just to do another mock, and then we should be ready to rock and roll. And I'm targeting this weekend or early next week for the first YouTube version of Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff. So, like I said, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel because the whole idea here behind this is that you as the audience will be able to finally engage with me and my guests. We can interact with each other, we can answer questions, go back and forth, debate, agree, all that kind of good fun stuff. So that's the next level of Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff, and that's it's a big goal of mine. It always has been from day one for me to be able to interact with you, the audience. So we are right on the cusp of making it happen. Now, speaking of making it happen, the Eagles, the 2024 Eagles, are now a 53-man roster. Training camp's over. Today, all the teams had to make their final cuts to get down to 53. So we have the list. If you haven't heard yet who made the team, I'm about to go through it with you, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. So, I guess we'll start with the cuts first. I'll tell you who was cut. How's that? And then I'll again, once I get to the roster, we'll talk about my thoughts on who was kept and who wasn't. So the Eagles released Oren Burks, linebacker, Paris Campbell, wide receiver, Nick Gates, offensive lineman, Matt Hennessy, guard and center, wide receiver John Ross, tackle and guard Brent Toth, Gottlieb Diaz, tackle and guard, tackle Anam Dankwa, running back Tyrion Davis Price, tight end Kevin Follish, defensive tackle Gabe Hall, wide receiver Jacob Harris, wide receiver Griffin Hebert, defensive end Teron Jackson, tight end E.J. Jenkins, cornerback Josh Jobe, outside linebacker Terrell Lewis, center Dylan McMahon, cornerback Zach McPherson, running back Kendall Milton, defensive tackle P.J. Mustafa, wide receiver Joseph Ignata, running back Lou Nichols, guard center Jason Poe, tight end Armani Rogers, safety Andre Sam, linebacker Brandon Smith, cornerback Sean Stevens, safety Caden Stearns, tackle Lycan Vakahali, wide receiver Austin Watkins, tight end Albert Akwubanam, and wide receiver Aeneas Smith, both on injured reserve, designated for return. And they also, of course, placed Sidney Brown on the physically unable to perform list, which I believe means he's out until at least week 8. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what that list means. Yesterday, the prior releases to today was quarterback Will Greer, defensive back Perry Nickerson, offensive lineman Julian Akawara, and offensive lineman Max Sharping. So, where does that leave us, folks? Well, that leaves us with a depth chart, a 53-man roster. So let's go through by position and I will give you my thoughts on what the Eagles have done. So those names that are just listed were the ones that were cut today. All right, so for wide receiver, as we know, the part of the 53-man roster, the Philadelphia Eagles for 2024 season are A.J. Brown, no surprise, of course, Devontae Smith, Britton Covey, and Johnny Wilson. So currently, right now, the Eagles have only kept 4 wide receivers, which is very interesting. I do expect them to add another at some point. Now, the surprise to me is Johnny Wilson. Now, the preseason, I watched most of the games. I can't tell you I was watching, with 100% intent like I do the regular season games. So maybe I missed something, but I don't remember Johnny Wilson to me standing out at all. So I know he's the not USC, the Florida State wide receiver. I don't know. This one surprises me. I mean, not that there was anybody really that really jumped out, which is why they went out and got. I'm sorry, hang on. You know who I'm missing is they do have 5 wide receivers. I'm sorry because they got what's his name from Washington. So I blame the Eagles because they don't have him right now for some reason on the depth chart. But obviously, uh, he's there. I don't know why they don't have him on a depth chart. It's kind of weird. Why is that? Doesn't make much sense to me. Anyway, I'm talking about Jahan Dotson. He's going to be the number 3 a wide receiver on the team, but right now he's not even listed on the depth chart for some unforsaken reason. Anyway, folks, so those are the 5 wideouts. Now, the only one I have issue with is Johnny Wilson. Now, I was rooting, as you know, if you listen to past podcasts here, I was rooting for John Ross to make the team. I think he would have been a great speed threat. The guy obviously has been a bust in the league, being a first-round pick out of Cincinnati, played with the Giants, didn't do much there either, and now he gets cut here as well. Now, I'm not sure if he'll be picked up by another team. My guess would be probably not. So it's possible the Eagles could bring him back on the practice squad. We'll find that out later this week. But regardless, he is gone. And then I was just thinking that they would just keep Paris Campbell around, a guy who's injured and missed most of the preseason games. Had a pretty strong camp prior to that, but ended up missing a lot of the preseason. And I thought they may just keep him for veteran, a guy who's a veteran to come in, spell someone, and have the experience. But they also released Paris Campbell, so we'll see if maybe he tags on with somebody else. But Johnny Wilson making the team was shocking to me. Now, again, here's just be a perfect example where I could throw him out there right now. And if I was on YouTube right now, we could have a talk. Maybe some of you out there could tell me more about Johnny Wilson because I'd be very interested to know more about him. So the wide receivers, once again, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, Britton Covey, and Johnny Wilson. Those are the 5 wide receivers the Eagles will be taking into the season. Left tackle, of course, we know about Jordan Mailata as we go into the offensive line now. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll go to the offensive line. So the offensive line, Jordan Mailata, Fred Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Trevor Keegan, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, Mikael Becton, Lane Johnson, and Darlin Kennard. Don't really have an issue with any of these guys. The one guy that I kind of liked was Nick Gates. I was kind of hoping that he'd make it, but it looks like they picked, I guess, either Keegan or Kennard over him. I kind of knew that the camp and the size, you got to love the size of Fred Johnson. I had a feeling that Fred Johnson was going to make it. People were saying really good things about him. He's another huge offensive lineman. The Eagles find these gigantic dudes. And he's another guy that was, coming on pretty strong. I kind of figured he'd make it. Keegan, a lot of people were saying good things about, as well as Kennard. I thought Gates had a legitimate shot. I'm not going to cry over Gates not making it really at all. But he was a guy that kind of impressed me when I was watching him. But those are the guys there in the offensive line. Should be one of the strongest in the league. no doubt about it. So now the Eagles did finally release Toth, who has been around forever and it's been a project. Um, but apparently they finally are cutting strings with him. Now he's a guy that I can almost guarantee you, I'd put my house on it, that if nobody picks him up, that the Eagles will bring him back as a practice squad player. There's no question in my mind that he'll be that. He'll be added to that if nobody else claims him. All right. So far, the only real big shock to me, is Johnny Wilson as wide receiver. Um, so I don't know. I'm gonna have to do some more research on him, and we're gonna have Matt on next week. So maybe Matt's got some insight on Johnny Wilson. So more to come, more to come. But that's the one that so far has shocked me the most as far as making the team. Running backs, of course, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Gainwell, Will Shipley. No surprise there. They only kept three. They did not go to a fourth. I was hoping, as you know, that if they went to a fourth, it would be Milton, who's the guy that I liked best out of the plethora, really, of running backs that the Eagles had in camp. But I expect them to bring one or two of those running backs, to the practice squad if they don't, latch on to another team, whether it's Price or Milton. Either way, I was kind of hoping for Milton, but he did not make the team. So again, it's Barkley, Kenneth Gainwell, and Shipley. Again, no surprise. Those are the three that I predicted anyway. And then quarterback, of course, Hurts, Pickett, and McKee. Again, I think that cosmetically, it's just Pickett as the second. I think, you knock on wood, if anything is to happen to Hurts this year and he misses any extensive period of time, I I really think that behind closed doors, the Eagles consider Tanner McKee number two. And Pickett's on the team, of course, but I think if they find a way to trade him at some point before the trade deadline, they will do that. That's just a prediction. I don't have any insight on that. It's just what I'm thinking. All right, let's move over to the defense. So that's going to be your starting offense, folks. Did I do tight end? I think I skipped over tight end, didn't I? Tight end, Dallas Goddard, of course, and Grant Calcaterra. So no surprise there, other than, shouldn't say no surprise there. That was a bad lead in. Because my second biggest surprise was that EJ Jenkins didn't make the team. I thought Jenkins had a really solid shot. If the Eagles were going to keep three tight ends, he would have made it. Now, clearly, they made an organizational decision not to keep three tight ends. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't. Because, to make sure you get somebody else in there over EJ Jenkins, I'm okay with. But as long as you pick the right person, that's the part where it gets debatable. So I'm not too concerned about having two tight ends, other than the fact that if they cut EJ Jenkins and brought in, to save a position for X player, and X player is not one that I agree with, then I got an issue with it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so now we go over to defense. And on the edge, of course, we got Bryce Huff and Brandon Graham as defensive end, along with Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, and Patrick Johnson. I got no issues whatsoever with the guys that they kept on the defensive end. I like Patrick Johnson a lot. I never thought he was really on the bubble like some in the media in Philadelphia were speculating. I think Patrick Johnson, when he does need to come in and play, always gets a push. He always seems to make stuff happen. I think he's a good, solid tackler. I think he gets good pass rush. And obviously, he's a very the most biggest contribution he makes to the team is on special teams. So I never thought his job was in jeopardy at all. Jalix Hunt, obviously, is the project that they drafted with a third-round pick this year, showing definitely signs as to why the Eagles liked him. He definitely has tremendous athletic ability. He's just learning the game. And is obviously facing a lot bigger. He's taken a huge, giant step in terms of the quality of opponent, that he's needing to, facing on the pass rush, with the offensive lineman, because he played at such a small college. So, but the ability is definitely there. There was no doubt he was going to make the team. And I don't know how much he's going to play this year. That remains to be seen. But there was no way they were going to release him. That's for sure. No other surprises there. Nolan Smith, we just need to see him take a step this year. He has to, because right now, in my opinion, he is a bust. Now it's too early. Actually, it's probably too early to use the bust word. I got to give him another year, but he's not looking promising to me. I mean, the other day, the last preseason game of the year, he's playing against third and fourth stringers, and he was not impactful at all. That's concerning. That should be concerning to everybody. Josh Sweat, of course, and Bryce Huff and Brandon Graham. Round out the defensive ends. All right, so now on to defensive tackles, which should be a huge strength in this team. Jordan Davis, Marlon Tuipulotu, Jalen Carter, and Thomas Booker. Milton Williams, as well as Moro Jomo. Now, the guy that I was raving about last podcast, you guys who listened to my last podcast, the guy that I wanted to make the team, I knew he was on the bubble, but a guy that was impressing me every single time. I was talking about, when I was watching the preseason games, and I didn't see much about Johnny Wilson. He didn't really come off the tape to me. The guy who did come off the tape to me more than anybody else was Thomas Booker. And for me, and I know some other Eagle fans that are out in YouTube land, I won't name any names, didn't have him making the team. And I'm like, what are you watching? This is why Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff is going to be your source for the most accurate opinion. And I have no problem saying that. I've been an Eagles fan for a long time, and I know football. But there's some Eagle fans out there that did not have Booker on the team, and I'm like, what the hell are you watching? These predictions that they were making. Now, I didn't come out with a prediction video. I just gave my thoughts on who should make the team, and I said Thomas Booker last week. It's on tape. Let's go back one episode. And I am so happy that Booker's on this team. That guy was in beast mode every single play in the preseason. Pushing whoever was trying to block him back. Showed effort on every play. I was super impressed by this guy. And doesn't surprise me at all he made the team. I'm just happy he did. I'm happy the Eagles saw what I saw. And they most certainly did. So it makes me happy that the Eagles know what they're doing as well. Not to say that I didn't think they were, but it just confirms that the Eagles, with all the coaching changes and everything that's going on in the organization, that they still know what they're doing. And they saw what I saw, and that is Thomas Booker is a beast. So he made the team, and I am very thankful for that. This defensive tackle unit it's got a chance to be, I won't say probably, but it's got a chance to be the best in the NFL. I mean, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams, those three are very good and obvious players, I should say, and Carter's got a chance to be elite. And then you got to back him up with Marlon Tuipulotu, Booker, who I was just talking about, and Ajomo. Ajomo was another guy that, if it wasn't for Booker, he was the other guy that was standing out on defensive line when I was watching those matchups. So I thought he had a strong camp as well. So, this defensive line, I don't know how well they'll do at attacking the quarterback, which is obviously a key part of what defensive lines do. But they should at least get a good push. I just don't know if they have enough, especially without Reddick here, to actually finish and get to the quarterback for sacks. That's where Bryce Huff, of course, that's where Jalen Carter taking another step, and that's where Josh Sweat has got to rebound from having an off year last year and be Josh Sweat of old. And then, of course, like I talked about, Nolan Smith showing some signs. He's just I'm very concerned about him right now at this point. All right, and just Jalen Hunt's just not ready yet, but he's a guy, might be able to help us later in the season. I don't know. To me, he's probably a year or two away from being a real impactful player as he continues to learn the game and just get used to the competition. All right, linebackers, which was always made for some great debate and conversation during the offseason, are going to look like this. Devin White, they brought it, made the trade from, I don't think they traded, they signed him from Tampa Bay. Devin White, Nakobe Dean, Ben Van Sumeren, I've talked about him. I said I've always liked what he brings to the table. I think he's an athletic, big linebacker. He's still kind of learning the game himself. He was a little bit more raw last year. He's kind of like the Jalen Hunt. Jalen Hunt's a much bigger prospect than Van Sumeren was, but they're kind of in the same situation where Van Sumeren didn't play much last year, but when he did, looked impressive. And he's another special teams guy as well. You need those guys. I like that Ben Van Sumeren made the team, so I'm very happy with that. Nakobe Dean, of course, talked about him looking the best he's ever looked since he's been an Eagle. So hopefully, knock on wood, this guy can stay healthy this year and become the player that we all hope that he would be. Zach Bond may have lost out. I guess we'll find out, in Brazil, who gets the starting nod. Is it going to be N'Kobe Dean along with Devin White, or is it going to be Bond who held on to that linebacker? He was the number one, but Dean made a really big time push by the end of, you know, training camp. So we'll see. But anyway, they got Zach Bond, of course, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. No surprise there that he made the team, and he earned it. He's not just didn't make the team because of his name. I think there was no doubt he was going to make it anyway because of his name, but he earned it because of what he did on the field. So good job there by the Axeman Jr. And that's it for linebackers. Now, I have two questionable cuts at linebacker, and I'm only just putting questionable because they would have had to keep 6 linebackers if they did keep another one, and that might be too much. So I understand why they were cut, and I don't have any issue with them, um, being cut over the guys I just mentioned because those guys should be on the team. But Oren Burks never really had a chance. I mean, he wasn't healthy the entire most of training camp. Didn't play in any of the preseason games except for the last one, and actually played pretty well. He's the guy that replaced Greenlaw in the Super Bowl when he went down and played pretty well. So I thought that was a promising and good signing by the Eagles, bringing Burks in here, but he was cut. So Owen Burks did not make the team. I would think if he's not picked up by somebody else, which he probably will be, I don't think Burks is going to come back to the practice squad. I'll be happy if he does. I'd be shocked if the Eagles don't bring him back to the practice squad. If he does, get out there or get passed over, I should say, not claimed. But someone will probably, if not, it'll probably be the 49ers, actually, who would probably bring him back, take him back. But anyway, Owen Burks did not make the team. And neither did the other guy that I thought was impressive during the preseason games. Another guy that jumped off the page. Like I said, there weren't many players that jumped off the page to me in the preseason games. But another one was Brandon Smith, linebacker. Now, I did see him make some over pursuit. I did see some of that. I did see some coverage issues with him as well. And no doubt about it. I saw some mistakes. So it doesn't surprise me that he was cut necessarily. However, I also saw that this guy plays the physicality of a linebacker that I love. He's a very physical player. I loved it. I loved his aggression out there. And I'm hoping that he comes back as a practice squad player if he's not claimed by anyone else. So, but I don't have an issue that he make the team. I was just kind of rooting for him to make the team. But again, they would have had to keep 6 linebackers to do that, and that's kind of a lot. So again, and I like Ben Van Sumeren. So I'm not going to take issue with them keeping him over Brandon Smith or Burks. All right, on to cornerbacks. Another highly watched camp battle. The ones that made the team, of course, Slay, Quinyon Mitchell, of course, the number 1 draft pick. Isaiah Rodgers, of course, the guy that they signed last year, even though he was on being suspended from football because of his gambling issues. He made the team. Kaylee Ringo, no surprise there, had a very strong camp. Looks very promising at the cornerback position. The one that surprises me is Eli Ricks. Now, Matt, when we have him on, he's going to praise Eli Ricks. I know he's a fan of his. I'm not as big a fan of Eli Ricks. I know some Eagle insiders are fans of him too. I haven't seen it from him. I haven't seen why people think he's so good. So I'll talk to Matt about Eli Ricks. We'll have him on, and we'll see what his thoughts are on Ricks making the team. I'm sure he's happy about that. Josh Jobe did not make the team. So he was on the team last year. Jobe did not make it. So they chose to keep Ricks over Jobe. I don't really have much of an issue with that. The guy I was kind of rooting for was Zach McPherson. Now, McPherson has never really lived up to, I think they drafted him in the 3rd round. I want to say he was a 3rd or 4th round pick, I believe. And when he was, like last year, he was really having a strong camp and a strong start to the season, and then he went out with a torn Achilles. So he just couldn't get a break, and he really needed to have a super impressive camp probably to hold on with all this depth that the Eagles suddenly have this year. This is a position that they've been down on depth, and especially youth, for the last, I don't know, 5 years. So now they have all this injection of youth, and it makes the competition much stronger for Zach McPherson, and he was not able to hold these younger guys off. And Eli Ricks is the one that they chose over him, and Job. So Job and McPherson are gone. The issue I have here is keeping Bradbury over those guys. That's my issue. I would have cut Bradbury and kept either Job or McPherson, and for me, my preference would have been McPherson. But they signed Bradbury, and so as we get into the safety chat, actually before we do that, the other two cornerbacks, basically nickel corners, at least at this point, are Avante Maddox and Cooper DeJean. Of course, those two guys were going to make the team, so no surprise there. So my biggest issue is Eli Ricks. Oh, I'm sorry, uh, James Bradbury, who's obviously converted to safety now and can still be a corner in an emergency situation. But Bradbury is the guy keeping another safety. Now, they did need to obviously keep a fourth safety until Sidney Brown returns, but that won't be now until it looks like week 8. So they needed a fourth safety, and I would have taken Sam. I would have kept Sam and cut Bradbury. Now, here's what I'm going to say about Bradbury. I like the player Bradbury. He's a stand-up guy. I just think he's done. I just think his best days are behind him. Even at safety, I saw him getting beat in the preseason by third and fourth stringers. Um, I just don't know what to make of him. Now he's learning a new position, so you got to give him, take that into account a little bit. But to me, they're holding on to this guy. I don't know if they really are intent on carrying him through the season. It wouldn't surprise me that before the Eagles play in Brazil, that the Eagles make trade James Bradbury for probably peanuts, but just to trade him. That would not surprise me. And then if there's a guy that they're able to claim over the next couple of days for the practice squad, like Sam or someone else that was cut from a different team, then I could see them bringing him in as the fourth safety. That's what I think might happen. But anyway, the other safeties that made the team, CJ, of course, Gardner Johnson, Reed Blankenship, of course, as we know. Tristan McCollum, he was the other guy that really stood out. There's three main guys that were not starters. N'Kobe Dean, of course, stood out too, but I'm just saying he was kind of expected he's expected to be good, right? But was Thomas Booker, like I said, he made the team. EJ Jenkins, who did not make the team. Brandon Smith, who did not make the team. Although, like I said, I admitted that Smith didn't have a, quote unquote, a strong, didn't look strong in those preseason games. Definitely saw a lot of mistakes, but he also played some of the most physical football of anybody out there. And lost my train of thought here, but he stood out as well. Tristan McCollum played very, very well. Way better than Bradbury, matter of fact. So you can see how he and why he made the team. So congratulations to him. He worked his butt off to play well and deserved to make the team. So good job for McCollum. And then we'll see what happens with Bradbury. You heard what my thoughts are as far as what I think the Eagles might do with him. I'm kind of hoping they do find a trade partner, let him go somewhere, and then either bring Sam back if he's out there and not claimed, or another safety until, of course, we get Sidney Brown back. Once Sidney Brown comes back, that might be when Eagles might just outright release Bradbury at that point. Once Sidney Brown is back in the fold. But they're going to they're not rushing Sidney Brown back. He looks like he's ready to play right now. He's done everything he could to get back in time for the season opener. But the Eagles are going to take their time. And that makes sense. Really bad knee injury like he had. They're idiots to play their starters in that Giants game as like fumed over at the end of last season. Just total stupidity on the Eagles' part, and it cost them Sidney Brown, for half of the season now because they're going to wait until looks like about week 8 to activate him. So, but that part makes sense. I don't mind them giving him more time, more than enough time, really, to fully heal from that late season injury of a torn ACL. So he's going to be itching to play, man. When he comes back, he's going to be like a tiger being let out of a cage. I can't wait to see that. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I think this Eagles team, this roster, offensively is one of the best in the NFL. I don't think anybody will debate that. Defensively, a lot of question marks, but there's a lot of youth being injected. And there's a lot of guys that the Eagles will be depending on this year to become, a good enough defense so that this Eagles team is a Super Bowl contender. And the key guys are Bryce Huff, because he's replacing Reddick. And we need him to be the attack force on a defensive line, which he has shown being able to do as a part-time player. A big step up for Jordan Davis, which I've said was the other key. We need him to be a full-time player now. No Fletcher Cox. There's no insurance policy. We need Jordan Davis to be Jordan Davis. Jalen Carter, we expect great things from. Josh Sweat, we need a rebound season. He totally tailed off the whole second half of the last year. Nolan Smith, another guy. Need to see it, much like Nakobe Dean. But unlike Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith hasn't shown anything. And Nakobe Dean is finally looking like the guy we drafted. And we're hopeful that would be the leader of this defense. Now, he needs to now prove it during the regular season, but he had as strong a camp and as strong a preseason as anybody on this team. It's probably the best defensive player during the preseason games overall. Those are the guys. Those are the key guys. I think cornerbacks, there's a lot of youth there, but I think it's good youth. We'll see. It's still open to see whether or not Quinyon Mitchell or Keelan Ringo or Isaiah Rodgers is going to be the opposite of Slay on the other side. Right now, they haven't really said. But there's at least some depth there so they can try guys out and see who's going to be the fit. So, and safety's in a better spot right now than it's been in many years as well. So with CJ Gardner obviously being the key there. So that's kind of where I am with the 53-man Philadelphia Eagles. There'll be some changes here. Could be Bradbury. I don't know if this will be the final one that they bring into Brazil against the Packers, but more than likely, this is what we're going with. At least 99% of the roster is filled. We'll see who they bring in on the practice squad. We'll talk about it. And the next episode, my fingers are crossed, folks. My fingers are crossed that the next episode of Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff will be on YouTube. So you want to make sure you don't miss that. All right, until next time, folks, thank you as always for listening. The Eagles roster is set and ready for takeoff. Takeoff will be in Brazil next Friday night. In Brazil against the Packers, who are going to be one heck of a team to test the Eagles right off the bat. So, with that said, thanks again for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff on YouTube. We're going to be there very soon. Take care, everyone.